We'll get started. I'm Robert Calafiore, one of the Associate Deans at Hartford Art School, and it's been my pleasure all year to host our Auerbach Lecture Series. And to get us started this afternoon, I'd like to introduce our Dean, Nancy Stewart, who will tell you a little bit about the Auerbach series and welcome you. Thank you, Dean Stewart.
Thank you. And thank you, Bob, for everything you do to make these lectures possible. This is our final Auerbach lecture of the season, but we have been doing this for 20 years, thanks to the Beatrice Fox Auerbach Foundation of the Hartford Art School Endowment, Inc. This endowment has allowed us to bring visiting artists to campus sometimes for 2 days to meet with students and have a critique and specific classes. But obviously during the pandemic, we have been forced online. And but the pleasure of that is we get to reach further afield for guests that might not be so close by. So there's always a silver lining to that. We do hope in the very near future, our next year's series may be face-to-face. But that being said, it is a pleasure to welcome today's speaker. And to introduce her, I'm going to introduce Professor Tatiana Potts of the Printmaking Department to tell us more about our guest artist.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm very excited to welcome Althea Murphy-Price, who was my mentor during the graduate studies at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. She continues being a huge inspiration for me, mentor and friend and fellow printmaker. So I'm super happy that she's able to join us today, even though it's via Zoom. It would have been better in person. But we are happy to have her here and have her sharing her work with us. Althea Murphy-Price specializes in printmaking and is Associate Professor of Art at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. Her work contemplates the power of hair as signifier of culture's self-identity. She received her Master of Arts in printmaking and painting from Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. Her Master of Fine Arts in printmaking from Tyler School of Art Temple University in Philadelphia. She has presented and exhibited her work internationally and nationally in such cities as Philadelphia, Chicago, Baltimore, Richmond, St. Louis, Cincinnati, Charleston, South Carolina, Beijing, China. She juried group exhibitions, including 2009 International Printmaking Exhibition in Jingdezhen, China, the 79th Annual International Print Center Competition in Philadelphia, and Boston Printmakers Exhibition, Piccolo Spoleto Invitational Exhibition in Charleston, South Carolina. In addition to her exhibition record, Althea Murphy-Price has also been an artist in residence at the Frank Lloyd Wright School, University of Hawaii in Hilo, and the Vermont Student Center. Her work has been featured in 2009 spring issue of Art Papers and the book on printmaking, A Complete Guide to Materials and Processes by Beth Grabowski and Bill Fick. In her own words, my love for art comes from a love of making. Her texture, style, color, and often its cultural association has influenced my interest in the elaborate decoration of form and space. My creative process is one of the parallels and approach to styling hair. The variable and complaint nature of hair allows me the freedom to work in a number of ways rooted in ornamentation. In the attempt to disguise the material, deception is distinctive characteristic in manifestation of the artificial and ephemeral. Form of accoutrement found with the fashion, such as clothing, jewelry, and former headwear serves as visual cues for my own expression. Without further ado, let's welcome Althea.
Thank you so much, Tatiana, and thank you to all of those that have helped in organizing this event. I feel very privileged and humbled to be here. So thank you, Robert Calafiore. Thank you, Nancy Stewart. Thank you, Tatiana. Potts and whoever else might have been involved in organizing, Jenny Friedman, possibly. I've heard such wonderful things about everyone there. I only wish I could be there in person. But nonetheless, I'm glad to have this opportunity to share my work with you today. So I'm going to just really quickly just share my screen. Okay.
So while we're transitioning, I just wanted to also point out that participants are allowed to post their questions in chat, which we will be addressing at the end of the talk. Thank you.
1 minute. Okay, I think we're good now. Okay. So hello everyone. It's nice to share my work with you. I wanted to start off by sharing with you some of the current activities that I have going on. But in general, Tatiana did such a nice job of introducing my work and talking about it. I work in these three. Currently, I'm working in these three intersecting bodies of work through print, which manifests itself through lithography and screen printing, through sculpture, and then through also photography. And all of my approaches to working, I find inspiration and I find motivation in both the materials and the method of working. So they hold for me symbolisms, personal and personal connections as well. And so I'm going to end up talking about a lot of that stuff as I share with you today. But so just to begin, we're getting set up here. There we go. Okay. So I'm currently participating in an artist in residence with the Brandywine Workshop in Philadelphia. And I'm one of 5 artists, I believe, that are participating in this workshop. This is usually in person. However, with COVID, they've made it, I say COVID, but with the pandemic, they've made it a virtual collaboration. And it really is a collaboration. So I'm working with one of their master printers, Alexis Nutini, who is master printer, runs Dos Tres Press in Philadelphia, and also an artist. He's so well known for doing these amazing jobs, creating woodcuts using a CNC router. And so since I have been very interested in automative processes involving print lately, I wanted to work with him. And so, so this is just an example of some of the blocks that he's created, and he's created them from images that I took from prints or prints that I would make lithographically, and then convert them into digital images, which then are translated into the block here. And so he's using them, alternating them into different colors and in different arrangements. I sent him some palette ideas for this, and so it's a little bit of me, it's a little bit of him in terms of colors and choices in that, but that's what's been really exciting to see this unfold. And so the edition that he's working on creating for this project will be a variable edition, so none of them will look alike. And so the outcome will look kind of like, like this. It kind of looks like this, like kind of connected form, like elongated. So I'm really excited about that project, working on currently. Another activity that's going on currently is this exhibit that I have. I've had up for a month now at the Condoro Marble Building in Knoxville. And so this is, this gallery space is the home base for what is known as TriStar Arts. It's a collaboration with the Aslan Foundation and represents, it's a cooperative in a way that represents all of the state of Tennessee. So it's exciting that they have their home base now in Knoxville, and as part of it also have this like really beautiful gallery space as well. And so so this is just some images from this exhibit. It's the founder of TriStar Arts is Brian and Carolyn Job. They've done this incredible job at representing artists throughout the state. They have this great website too, which connects artists and helps them be represented. It's so this piece here, this piece is called Cushion, and it's the most recent piece I've made. So, you know, I just completed this piece in what month are we in now? And into February or so. And so it's a combination of synthetic, or I might say nylon plastic, but it's really synthetic hair, which is the white, and 3D printed elements, which are the black. And then there's also these photographs in this exhibit. So this exhibit is really all new work for me. This is work that the second to most recent work I've created. This is called Through the Veil. And so you can see in the photographic work that the forms, much like you see here, that like that needle, it's like a 3D printed element. And they kind of weave through these kind of ribbon-like forms, and see this there, the piece there on the wall called Blackbird Girl. And this piece here. So you can see that the components that are on the head here are also 3D printed. So I just, excuse me, getting my cursor in the right place. Here we go. Okay, so I recently just talked about my work this weekend, and I divulged that I don't like public speaking very much. And honestly, that hasn't changed. But I do like the opportunity to connect with people. And so what I wanted to do for this talk today is I wanted to just share my work with you in the format of the progress of my work and how things have changed. I'm imagining there's plenty of students out there in the audience. And so in many respects, I'm thinking about you. I'm thinking about the things that I needed to know, or the things that were helpful for me to learn about other artists when I was in this most influential time in my creative experience. I so often found myself conflicted with decision making in art school, thinking about what were the rules. What were the rules I was supposed to follow? Are there bad rules, good rules? Which ones am I breaking? That sort of thing. And so I want to talk about this work within that framework and kind of bounce back and forth and to share with you some of the things I was thinking about. So, you know, it took me a while to kind of stumble into the path of working creatively. Lots of fears, lots of hesitation, and lots of intimidation about the art practice and what that meant for me. What was I supposed to make? What was I not supposed to make? Those types of things. And when I realized that one of the reasons why it was so difficult to find my footing was because in most attempts when I went to make work, I wanted to address these big ideas all on my own. And so let's say, you know, solving world hunger, so to speak. They weren't that big, but they were big, these big ideas that were reflected outside of me. And what I had to realize was that I had to first think through me and know what I knew and respond to what I knew. So these themes were, however, consistent, and these interests were consistent with my current interests. So, so subjects such as like femininity, identity, both gender and racially, social status, and then formal qualities as well. So an interest in texture, an interest in in surface texture, layering. Those were all still the same, but I had to find my own unique personalized way to approach them. So I'm going to share with you some really old work. I'm going to kind of time travel. Makes me feel a little uncomfortable to share this with you. But this is my very first print. So I was in school at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. This is, it's not a 2000, it's like a 98 or so print. And I was very proud of this. The reason I'm sharing it with you is because looking back at work like this, I think of particular artists. I'm thinking of the choreographer Twyla Tharp. She has a book that's called The Creative Habit. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's a it's a really rich text. And in that book, she proposes the notion of a creative DNA, that the DNA that you have, it's ingrained in you, your interests creatively. It's ingrained with you, your interests formally. It's part of who you are. And whether or not it always looks the same, that those interests, the kind of the core of you, that's your DNA, will still stay with you, regardless of what you're making and regardless of what point in life. And so I look back at this very first print of mine. There's no concept intended here, or maybe there was a little bit, but I can't help but notice the qualities that are kind of very similar to what I'm doing today. If you notice this kind of like overarching kind of like slide and like kind of striation across the top, looks very formally similar to the things that I still do today, or those prints that I shared with you from the residency at Brandywine. If you look at the figure and the silhouette of the figure, this is a brown person. I'm still thinking about race. The eyes for me were really symbolic. I was really interested in this like symbol of the spiral as like looking outward and looking inward, and it constantly in movement. So constantly in this change, being an awareness of outside of ourselves and inside of ourselves. These are still ideas I'm still engaged with. The fish, I don't know. So I remember the first time that I saw an artist's work that involved hair, and it was this work. Okay, so it's David Hammond's work. David Hammond has done lots of work involving hair, but this was the first work that I saw, and it was, wow. I mean, I found immediate connection to it. It was and in my own personal way too. And so I quickly found this connection. Hair was a staple of my childhood memories. And even now it's a tool in my adult life. And so I found so many symbolisms. First, symbolisms that were personal. So that was real inspiration for me to try working with this material as not just a material, but like a tool. I thought it's a drawing tool. It's a symbol for me. It's a stand-in or place card to even represent myself. And so this is one of the first pieces that I made using hair and combining it with printmaking. And I started doing this when I was in my second graduate studies at Tyler School of Art in Philadelphia. And so I was taking these like store-bought hair. I was cutting and making these little ponytails. And then I was using it in intaglio to make these soft ground etchings. So these are impressions on the plate here. And I did others like that. Other ways that I involved hair was through printmaking. And this is a large swatch of hair that's screen printed with the word lie. My thesis work, eventually this led to my thesis work. And my thesis work was, I created these hat forms using hair and wool. And so they were all needle felted, hand felted, wearable hat forms. They were somewhat humorous. So this one is called Dunce Cap. And I'm forgetting what this one was called, honestly. But you know, this was a really changing point for me. This like changed the game for me because I was finding a material that I could connect with and also had symbolism for me in these personal ways that connected to my personal life and also my family. Some of my heritage as I was thinking about it at the time. So other ways I explored with it, and then I'm going to talk about this kind of work more, but they became more sculptural as time went on. The other influence for me while I was studying at Tyler School of Art were images like this. So these are from the 1920s, 1930s, and they are cut out. And I found these in archives while I was studying at Tyler from magazines. One of these is Ebony or Jet, and I'm not sure, but so, you know, men prefer beauty. Clothes, talent, and personality play their part, but all else being equal, men prefer beauty. The subtle intrigue, finesse of skin and hair. You too can know the joy of being a preferred person, an utterly loving creature. And so before, my connection with hair was that I found this personal, very private relationship to it. I was, of course, aware that hair has all sorts of other social implications. So, of course, I was aware of that. But after seeing these advertisements, I felt a different type of fire, might say, lit under me, to use this symbol as something much more. Liz Gilbert, the author of Big Magic, which is another book that I love and would suggest getting. It's called Creative Living Beyond Fear. And she says in that book, she says, create whatever causes a revolution in your heart. I love that. And it did. That's how I felt in looking at this. And so it's still relevant now. So the beauty supply shop, and this is still another influence for me, much like those advertisements. But this is an image that was taken from while again, this is from Philadelphia. But what I found so intriguing about this space is that this visual representation of mass produced, of this like commercial industry of this synthetic or human hair, this like store-bought hair. In most cases, the hair that I use is synthetic. It's a nylon polymer plastic. So it's not real. So this sense of form of reservoir or inspiration, it was like an art supply store for me, was also intriguing because of the duality of a space that could both be in the business of disguise, but at the same time offer self-encouragement, offer love, faith, hope, right? And so this like kind of like shared role that this space has, I still find really intriguing. So this is going to fast forward a little bit, but after I finished graduate study, this is probably the only residency images I share in a presentation. But this is work that I created while I was at the Frank Lloyd Wright School of Art. And the requirements of that residency was for the artist to either respond to the architecture or the landscape. And so I chose to respond to the landscape by beautifying this already very beautiful plant and all the other kind of green life there with these cast resin cast resin copies or molds of the leaves. And so, so I kind of cast them and then I re-adhered them. So I reattached them. Now, what I think is important to say about this time for me was that that I completed my graduate study and felt like I had one foot in the traditions of printmaking, and I feel like I had another foot somewhere on the outskirts of sculpture or installation, and I really wasn't sure where that foot should be. I felt a little confused by that. There's another one. And so I really use this residency and this time after departing from graduate study, really in some ways to kind of like push aside printmaking as I thought. I thought I was being kind of more of the rule breaker in terms of printmakers go, and that as kind of being bad, working outside of the limits. But, you know, fool was on me. I'm casting and making molds, making copies, still doing kind of print-like things. So this was another piece that I did, and I worked in this 2,000 square foot area, and I started cutting by hand these patterns that were kind of intended to be like filigree or like lace patterns into the landscape, and making these kind of decorative patterns around the base of the trees. So also keeping in line with trying to find different ways of working. This is a time period where I later moved to Indiana University, where I began teaching there in Bloomington, and you know, still kind of in search, kind of one foot here, one foot there. I started to. This is when I first made one of these pieces, which I call my hair rugs. And it's amazing how long this work has stuck with me, but this is the very first one. And so what you're looking at here, what this consists of, these are hair clippings that I create by clipping the hair by hand. And then I'm using lace patterns. In this case, this is a tablecloth, and to make these arranged patterns on the floor that look like rugs. So this piece here will be in the next month, will be on display at the Hunterton Art Museum in Clinton, New Jersey, which also Tatiana is also in that show, which looks like a pretty phenomenal show. You know, it also includes Leslie Dill and some other artists like that. So other artists that I respect, very much so respect, not like that. So this just gives you an example of this process, right? So it's a lot of material that I'm cutting in order to create this pattern and to use this framework or matrix, right, to create this pattern. So I have several of these I'm going to share with you. So that's the final result of that piece. So over time, this work has changed. And like I said, this is one thing that's actually, it's kind of stuck with me, this working method. And it started to take on new meaning over time. And so I've started working with it in different ways as well. This piece is done in the same way, but with sugar. And it has a partnering piece, which is this one. This is one of the pieces that I did. I was thinking about value and desire. And so I actually used a different type of store-bought hair in this work. I used a store-bought hair that cost me like about $200 a pack. So it was very expensive. It's human hair, but it's manufactured hair. And so I was finding ways to explore those interests. This is a piece called In Her Place. And it's part of it's on the floor, on the cement floor, and another part is elevated on this pedestal, as you can see. So this hair that is sifted through this lace pattern, it's not adhered, so it's completely loose. That means it can be influenced by those around it, right? This piece here is another one that incorporated sugar. So and it is. It's installed on a white plexiglass, in fact, so doesn't show this here, but it's very like reflective surface. And this is a surface I continue to use. But so this is a combination of also hair, that very expensive hair, and sugar and rainbow sprinkles. And this is one of the largest that I created. This is 8 by 8 feet. And it also involves some sugar. It's called a Sweet Thought. And it was in a statewide contemporary drawing exhibition at TSU called Along the Horizon. So largely this work was influenced by these ideas of over-embellishment, right? But that when we're looking at things that feel over-embellished, we're not always thinking about what's absent, right? So all along this time, okay, so I was showing the work to you before that were kind of my form of like exploring and a way to separate myself from printmaking. Not as to say I didn't want to be separated, but to explore myself further, explore my own work further, only to realize that really I'm still exercising a lot of print methods or print sensibility. But all the while that I was doing this, which I do not typically share, is I'm making prints on the side. These prints become sketches. These prints become tools of the thought process, and in some ways they're like documents. So this is a print that I made during that time of making all of those hair rugs, and you can see something very similar about that, right? That I'm making them exactly the same way. These are lithographic prints. This one I exhibited in the exhibit that Tatiana mentioned in China, in Beijing, this one, I think. So, you know, I'm making these prints along the sidelines. The prints, however, they're on the sidelines because they're not really fulfilling and meeting all of my goals in a way, right? Like I'm exercising them, I'm doing them because I want to stay active. I want to keep working in the studio, but I'm not always sure where to go next. So they're kind of like a way to work myself into the next thing. And this is where the next thing led me. So I'm going to go through these relatively quickly, but this piece and a number of these pieces are on exhibit currently at the Huntsville Museum of Art in Alabama, and this piece is called number 613. And so to explain a little bit about this work, I created this long series of sculptural pieces using just synthetic hair and maybe glue. And so this is synthetic hair that's been fused with heat and then cut and arranged and made into these pieces, these wall pieces. This is another one called Love Affair. And it is several hundred pearl tip pins that are wrapped at the top with this hair, which doesn't quite look like hair anymore, right? Because it's plastic, and I'm heating it and fusing it, so it really looks like plastic. It looks like plastic and hair somewhere in between the two, right? It's kind of confusing in a bit, like it's deceiving you a little bit. And then they're all pinned individually into the wall. This piece is also installed at the Huntsville Museum of Art. This piece, titled, trying to remember, Arrangement, is, again, this is all this same material, the synthetic hair, partnered though with these silk leaves from from fake flowers, right? And then again, these like pearl tip pins. I could talk about this work a little bit more, in terms of influences, but I would say that I think this work reflects a time in which that I was really interested in just making. I wanted to take some of the ideas out and enter in some of the feelings in. And so this work became a lot more about the making in terms of labor And well, like, what significance does that have in terms of my own, when we think about practice involving hair or decoration? And so it was a lot more about that action for me than it was guided first by concept, but rather guided second by the experience and the experience of making it. I made this piece here. So all of these have this like several, multiples, right? They're made up of many units. This piece is also installed at the Huntsville Museum of Art. And this is just, this is called Hot and Gold. And I took these rods and heated this hair over the rods, right? And so a lot of the pieces also have partnering with the name, with the title, the number of the hair. So these are the prints. So as I said before, the prints are always going on, just kind of like under radar. And so these are the prints that I was making at the same time. And if you notice the kind of development in the prints is that now they're a little bit more dimensional, right? They're suggesting a little bit more of like an object. I was experimenting in ways of doing that. But again, these are lithographic prints. Okay, the cap. So trying to capture a bit more of dimension and form, which is what I was dealing with in this more sculptural work. Okay, so fast forward a little further. Oh, excuse me, didn't mean that. Hopefully I'm doing okay on time. So I moved to Knoxville, Tennessee, where I currently am living, and I have a new studio. It's not a space where I can make sculptural work, and I'm only making prints. And I started making this work. This is this series of prints I called Silky Jumbo, and they represent the same. This is representing a brand of hair called Silky Jumbo, and each swatch I used to create a different composition. These were studies for me. These were, we might call them like place cards. They were keeping me busy, and at the same time, they were kind of what I was using in a way, waiting for the next thing to happen or the next thing to make sense. And I must admit, this is the first time where they're making more sense to me. These prints are making more sense to me than they ever have, because they have a sense of objecthood to them that I didn't feel like they did before. So, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the method here, because everyone always wants to know about like how I made these. First off, I would say that the method to me is the primary motivator in some respects to creating this work, and why I continue to do it even today, because the method helps me flesh through and think through the ideas. So this work is intended to look like the real thing. Most often when people see this work, they think that it's drawn, or they think that it's the actual hair that's on the page, and it's not, it's ink, so it's printed. And so I'm doing this using a photolithographic process, in which I'm applying the hair directly. I'm using the hair as a drawing tool. I'm applying directly on a surface, and much like, and excuse me, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute. Okay. So I can show you something else I have for you. So much like maybe like a cyanotype, this, excuse me, do some moving here. Oop. Okay, is that good? You can see that?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So I'm going to let this play. I have this little video to share with you a little bit about my method, my process here in using lithography. What you'll see first, so I'm starting off with, I'm making a composition or framework for, this is a print that I'm working on currently. And so I'm using this red film as a form of like guideline or framework for what you'll see later, which make more sense. So what I'm using here is I am using what's called Ruby Lith. It's a film. It's like a masking tool, so it kind of blocks off areas. So I'm going to create this first. And now I'm using the hair, and this is this is something I'm currently working on. So if you notice, the texture is a bit different than you see in my current prints. But I'm preparing the composition. So this is the large, it's aluminum plate. It's a lithographic plate that I've transferred to put that hair directly on. And I'm putting it in a unit called an exposure unit, which has light in the bottom of that, that unit. And it's UV light, like the light of the sun, to expose that plate. So the areas that are blocked off are the areas that the hair is, where the hair is. And that's the image that gets retained and stored onto the plate. Now it's going back in. This is probably unnecessary for you to see, but it's that film, that red film that I was cutting from the very beginning, that's used to block out areas. So now the developing. And so that's the plate. So I'm going to stop it there because I'm looking at time. One minute, I'm going to turn back to my. Thank you guys for being patient. You know, all of these like click, click, click here, back and forth there. Okay. So, oh, excuse me, it did not go where I told it to. Let's see. get it where it should be. Okay. Oh, this is not so should be. There we go. Okay. Sorry about this, guys. Now I'm doing this again. And it still does it. It won't not do it.
You can try to do the PowerPoint again and just skip forward video errors so we can skip what you already showed.
Well,
Maybe that will be easier.
Let's see. I'm gonna speed through.
But you need to click again to share because we see you.
Okay, that's fine. Here we go. I'm just gonna, so you guys don't have to see me doing this because it looks like a mess. You probably see the light flashing on my face as I'm
Well, we encourage
clicking
participants
through.
to type the questions now. Whatever questions you have, we will address them afterwards. So I encourage you to type it now. We already have some appearing. So go ahead. There's a good time now. There you go.
Oh, great.
Awesome.
Okay. So this, okay, so now we should be fine. But a little bit of a little hiatus there. So I just want to share with you now where I currently am. As I said in the very beginning of my talk, that I'm working in this variety of ways, and I started collecting these. Like colorful trinkets, barrettes, hair ties, and things such as that, and it led to a series of prints. Which I was trying to create the same dimension through the prints. And so what I need to kind of backtrack to say is the lithographic work that I showed you, I was talking about kind of getting to this place of balance where I felt like I am both representing dimension in the way I want to, and or I'm representing the object as well as the print. And so still in that searching process, I found real resolution when I started to use screen printing. And so this is an example of a screen print that I've created where I'm printing it in layers. So I'm building up layers and with thick ink so that I can suggest that there's actually this form. I'm creating this dimensional print. And then I use those by cutting them out and then reorganizing them into these compositions. And so I'm going to go through some of this, my most recent printed work really quickly. So, so this is another example. This is called A Few Virtues. This is some collage work that I've been doing that is really, it's really just ink here cut out into these small punch shapes and then arranged in these compositions. So these are like those hearts that are those likes, you know, on Facebook, Instagram, that type of thing. It's a detail of that. That's that piece. And this is where I found real harmony between both the physical, the surface, the texture, and the print. So the part of this that represents hair is lithographically printed, like I showed you in the example there. And then the colorful elements are collaged on, and they're dimensional. Some are flocked, so some are fuzzy, some are shiny. This one is called From Me to You. This one is called Play. So, you know, I had to find a way to find some sort of, I would say, peace in a way for myself between both this like, this trying to reconcile different varying approaches. And I found that here. This is another one, Pink is Pretty, or so I think that's what's called. Okay, and so this is the one you've probably seen on the advertisement for this event, and this is a series of prints that I've created that is in a series called Search Perfect, and I call this Search Perfect because these are inspired by online search results. When I was searching for the words perfect hair, and what I discovered is that these online searches generated very similar results, of very similar features and similar characteristics. So typically this like flowy, straight, bouncy, less, hair. If you search other things, perfect, search nails, perfect skin, perfect nails, that type of thing, you see a lot of the same results. And some of that is starting to diversify a bit more now. But in general, there is this, oddly enough, this standard of comparison here, right? Between, for those that are, represent this, what is a collective taste or a standard, okay? So like the majority, and then, and those outside the majority, which represented myself, right? And I still take such fascination in the beauty of this hair texture. And so that's really what fueled me to make this work, is questioning, like, where is that fascination coming from? That admiration that I'm feeling looking at this work. So, okay, so this piece is called Counter. And this is again, I think where I'll start to finish and close here. But I've been working in 3D printing, and this piece Counter represents work that I've been doing over about 2 years. 2 years ago, I started learning 3D modeling and 3D printing. And it, much like the screen printing I was doing, is an additive process. It builds layer by layer by layer, right? And I found other interests also in that, not only as this automative process, but it also, has its origins and roots really in, in printmaking. It's another form of technology. And so, so here, this like collection, you would say, is a collection of over 125 individually 3D printed objects. And it's displayed on this white shiny surface. And a lot of this happened during the pandemic, working on this piece. So two reasons why, reasons why I was interested in working in 3D printing is, one, the 3D printed objects are made from plastics. So much like the nylon polymer fiber of the synthetic hair, there's a strong similarity there. And also, I like seeing this combination of the two-dimensional existing as the three-dimensional, right? So there's that aspect of this method, process, and execution that happens as well here. And then 3D printing is part of this commercial industry. So the same awe I found in looking at the beauty supply store, I feel it in this process, in this method here too. And I have several, I'm going to go through these really quickly because I have several images of photographs I took right off the press. So this is right as they finished and they're still in the printer. And because I kind of love them in this state. You can see the kind of the filament pulled in between the bullets there. And the support structure that they're mounted on. I exhibit, and if you notice, I exhibit a number of these with the support still on them because I like the connection that it makes in revealing that it is like part of this print. So this is a misprint. You can see the top of the head there, like totally got misaligned, cut off there. This is another one, misprint, right? So there's plenty of that still, like not everything works perfectly. Not everything works the first time. Okay. So this is how I'm displaying some of them. So you can see the support on the base. Okay, I want to share, I'm going to go through these really quickly. This was an exhibit at Auburn University. And in this solo exhibit, I don't know why that keeps happening. In this solo exhibit, I organized these, and this is my first presentation of this work. I organized these in different groupings. And I think of these as toolkits. So there's a combination here of, you can see these hair ties that also look like pills, with unicorn horns, flowers, and also surgical pliers. Here too, we have the combination of like, there's like tools of the comb and grooming, and then badges. So, so that leaves me where I am today, and brings us full circle to the exhibit that I showed you to begin with. But the same tensions that I feel like I'm dealing with in this 3D printed work, it's something that's consistently on my mind. I recently participated in this panel discussion about health and wellness, and in women. And this is the work that I shared. This is the work that I talked about. So in 2010, this hashtag, popular hashtag, Black Girl Magic, became really popularized. And it was, and it's been used to promote women of color, young girls that have made these amazing accomplishments. And so you see this amazing accomplishment occur, and you see it posted, hashtag Black Girl Magic. It's a hidden secret, right? It's a knowledge that's like, you can do and be anything. It's meant to encourage. And so I created this is the first set of photographic works that I created. But first, you can see the headpiece that she's wearing. And these are like helmets or sculptural pieces on their own. And so they are, you see this young figure positioned here relatively low in the composition with a lot of space above them. And yeah, and they're intended to be this like kind of fantastical in a way. They're intended to be youthful, playful, but they're intended to also be heavy, be excessive, over excessive. And so I'm thinking about this hashtag with a bit of a critical lens to explore, what does it mean to have these high expectations? What are the consequences of these high expectations on an early perspective, early in the world? So we're brought back full circle here. So this is the beginning. This is the work that I showed you at the beginning of my talk. And I'm just going to show you all of the works that I've created here. And so this is what you can see, the components in the hair are the same, are the 3D printed objects that I showed you in the piece counter. They end up here. And so here we see a combination of ladders and unicorn horns, gramophones. There's a combination of cell phone towers here, satellite dishes. What are those called? Tinker toys, right? Like building tools. Always flowers, always flowers. I think it's a wonderful metaphor for growth. Bows, packaged bows, veils, hearts. And so, in this work, it's much more than, for me, it's social commentary, and it's a response to this like Black Girl Magic. But really, it's also expressing my hopes and fears for the future. So this one here is Blackbird Girl. And this is where I'm going to complete. So I'm coming to a close here. But I just wanted to say, and I began my study and in school, and my exploration and making my own work, thinking about the rules, right? So thinking and wondering about what the rules were and how to fall within them, only to realize that really the truth of the matter is that there's really no rules. And when one can find and realize and let go of the sense of expectation that their work must create or must have, and work from a personal place is where real expansion happens, real potential happens there. So
I
that's all
couldn't
have.
agree more. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. And I'm really thankful that you found time and actually found time and came to talk with us, even if it's over line. And I want to take this time and actually read some of the questions they've been posting on here. We have still about 15 minutes. Some of the questions are that there are more than one question. So first of all, I would like to address Trevor is asking if he can get a list of the titles and authors of the books mentioned, and maybe any other books that you would recommend for beginning artists. So maybe we can just correspond with that through mail and we can share it later through the list.
Yes,
Thank you, Trevor, for
definitely.
your question. Then I would see in your sculpture and non-printed pieces, do you find that repetition is more about the visual effect of the final piece, or is it mainly about the process of making things, or both?
I would say it's about, well, it's definitely about both, but it's definitely more about the process. It's about feeling tired and exhausted through the process, right? It's about feeling dissatisfied, frustrated, uncomfortable through the process, right? And we don't actually plan to feel that way, right? We don't intend for that, but those are the aha moments in the method of doing it. Like, wait a minute, I was thinking that this work was about this, or I was making this work with these like visual goals, when in fact, no, this is the idea, right? This is what's lasting, is like this personal thing that's happening, and like, how best can I share that?
Of course. Is it also like freeing because you don't feel, I mean, you're not concerned as much with the failure, but you're actually allowing yourself to carry that process and materials, and you just keep going.
Right. Well, and I would say too, that's a good point, because I would say that anytime you're making multiples, it's freeing, because you like let go of the need for like the one to work,
Yes.
right? Multiples allows you to hide mistakes. Quantity allows you to hide mistakes. I think also, just to respond to that reader question, that a lot of the readers that I think about in terms of working creatively are ones that are really open to those mistakes and like and obvious and transparent about those. So like, but they're usually not artists. So like Liz Gilbert is the author of Eat, Pray, Love, right? But she has this awesome book, that like Big Magic, which you have to see. It's just such an awesome book.
Absolutely, and I
But
agree,
like,
because if often it's like you can be inspired by fashion designer, or or I mean cook, chef, or something else. Like
right.
inspiration doesn't necessarily have to come from art field. So I really enjoy the spectrum how you actually approaching and using a different materials, different processes. There is a mention here with by Megan, who is asking more about the process with printing hair, which you also show in video. So I don't know how much more. She also asking if you incorporate physical hair. So you actually talk about it. So Megan, if you want more expansion on it, we can talk a little bit later about that. I would move to other question here, which says, do you find the patterns within your nature installation where a sort of conscious inspiration, where you created that the pattern, said, I want to work with lace and hair now, or do you kind of go with the flow from one thing to the next and find connection afterwards?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. I think that's a good question, because it reveals like the thought process that, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, guys. I don't know how my phone keeps thinking I'm like waking up still. But yeah, so I think always as a guide, what I would say to any student is, don't think about the ideas first, just do the making. I debated sharing with you guys, which I mentioned earlier, but Coretic Kent's 10 rules. And they're rules for students primarily, but in teachers. But I would say look that up, because it's all about, the main rule is just to keep working, right? And then the ideas kind of make sense of themselves. And I know that in art school, we're encouraged, if not feel required to make a justification for everything that we do. But I tell you, I promise you, if you go with just on instinct and start working, you'll find the justification in time for that critique. You'll find it. It will come to you if you follow what's instinctual.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. That's just more work makes more work and more ideas, right? So it's different when you're staring at the empty page of paper and trying to create something versus when you already have something in front of yourself.
Yes, it's no way to
So
make it perfect.
we,
Right?
we do have another question here by Marisa, who is asking, how do you print from the hair plate? So for non-printmaker of this audience, maybe shortly you can explain that.
Yeah, I should have showed you the rest of my video. It's so long. It's like, I'm sorry. It's great. It's long though. Because so that I'm glad that you asked it, because that surface that I showed you, it's like this gray plate, and then the hair you could see on it look green. Well, that green part of the plate will stick to ink. And so in the printing process, that plate stays wet, and the areas that are gray on that plate stay damp. And then it's rolled over with this big roller that touches everything. But the areas that are green kind of retract that water so the ink can stick to them. But everywhere where it's gray stays wet, and so the ink just rolls over. It doesn't attach to it at all. And so I print those off of a lithographic press. Truth be told, it's the best way to print off of it is a lithographic press, but truth be told, it can be print off of anything that can have high pressure, right? So whether that's etching press or rubbing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do apologize for some, like for some people who are not pre-makers, that some terminology might have been a little off, that they weren't sure what we're talking about, because you mentioned many, techniques, like you were talking about variable addition, cyanotypes, photo plates, or screen print, or 3D print. What I found it very interesting is that you're still relating some sense to printmaking. So even if it's not necessarily print process, but it's still about multiples, or allowing yourself to play with, as you say, variable addition, which means like you don't print the identical print over and over again, but you allow yourself to explore. And I kind of see also what I would be interested in asking you. You talk about your clippings, they're your ephemeral prints. They actually, sometimes you adhere them, you combine them with sugar, or you cover them with plastic so they are not distorted. How important is it to you that you use synthetic or hair or commercial hair, and not, like maybe saving your own clippings or finding different clippings? Like, where is that underlying content to that? I would be
Yeah.
interested to know.
Yeah, it is everything to me that it's synthetic. And it's because it's one, and this is kind of clarification, is because usually I don't say that it's synthetic. The synthetic hair itself is intended to be, intended to disguise, right? So we're not supposed to look at it and know that like, oh, that's fake hair. We're supposed to look at it, it's like, it's hair, right? It's the real thing. And so it's that, and maybe consider me arrogant for thinking I can trick the viewer. Maybe that my intention is not always to trick the viewer, but I love that the fact that this material is always existing with that purpose, is to be a little bit, to look one way, and maybe, but have some limitations in its performance.
Yeah.
So, it can't do everything that hair can do. So, and it's that aspect of like the truth of the false, that I just love so much, Tatiana. And I think and I don't want to be too print heavy in talking, but I think that there's qualities of that truth and false that exist all through all art making, forms of art making, where we're looking at it as like, we're looking at the filter that our work goes through, right? Whether or not it goes from like, the clay through the kiln, or through the mold, or through the, right? It's like a transition where it exists, and it can be two different things at once, or it's three different things at once. And that I just find that like, I just love that metaphor, and it
Yeah.
makes so much sense for me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for answering that. And there's more from Marisa, that she says, thank you, as a Black lady in her 30s. I really appreciated the barrettes and other hair accessories. Lots of personal memories there. I wonder about the ephemeral also. So you kind of mentioned that, and also about the disposable or perception of disposability.
Hmm. Well, I think she, yeah, so 30s. Yes, I am. Yes, thank you for your question. The disposable part of it, I think you're like really picking up on something that that I think is also part of, part of the hair in general, right? But isn't it so much easier to think of disposing of something that's not, that we don't think of as real, right? Or that we see as a commodity and we can just buy some more of it, right? Oftentimes I think about that as like this as this like interchangeable identity, and not in a, and in some ways, some might take that read as like a negative as opposed to one's true identity. But isn't there power in that? I mean, I think there's huge power in that, to think of a choice, to have a choice, and to be comfortable with either. And I just think that is, I find that really, I find it somewhat inspiring, but there's a lot of, what's being brought up here is there's a lot of, gosh, what would I say? There's a lot of debate around these like topics when it comes to culture, when it comes to practice, right? Traditions, because you do really risk treading on people's like their own personal lifestyle or the lifestyle of those that came before them. And yeah, it's like, so, and especially when we're talking about hair, and within the Black community and for women, hair has so much significance. So it is like it's like a personal thing. I love this secret in a way, and in a way at times I feel almost uncomfortable because I feel like I'm dispelling the secret in a way too.
Yeah, well, you're
I like,
exposing yourself in some sense, right? Yeah, absolutely.
don't say it.
I absolutely see that. Well, Marisa said, and that will be last comment, and we can take one more question because unfortunately we're running out of time. But she says, thank you. Yes, it's really resonant. Also the hair through the lace, very heavy. So I really like the juxtaposition, and also what I wanted to mention last time is what I found very interesting of how you take a different media and different sense of how you portraying them, something that it's typical. I'm sorry, that's my phone, never rings. So it's more something that you create like barrettes that actually you can handle in hand. I'm not sure if you necessarily want the viewers to interact with that, but also clippings, or you have prints, and they all live in different kind of environment. Well, let's just take a talk.
I just
So
realized why it's doing that, but okay.
no,
You're in your question. I was listening to you.
so I was just kind of commenting on that I really appreciate how you're showing that interdisciplinary feel. And I'm not sure, I guess my last question would be, how do you actually feel like very sitting, like today is now I'm gonna make print. Tomorrow I'm using this synthetic material to roll it up and use my hands to create it, or have 3D printed to do it. So where is the decision how you move from one medium to another?
Yeah, well, one thing I don't always talk about, but I think that I can look at the work and see, is I can look at my work and I can see what was happening with my life. I can see how my life was changing. I can see the difference between responsibilities, or what my studio looked like, or what I had access to and what I didn't. And really it's largely a reflection of that. I think the freedom in being a creative person, but the true freedom of being a creative person is knowing that you're free, and that you're free to do whatever it is that you want to do and how you want to do it. You don't have to take on another name in the art world in order to like make some quilts, right? And make it justifiable. And so I think that work, and you might have heard me say this before already, but I think like my most recent work reflects the fact that I'm a mother. It reflects the fact that for me, it reflects the fact that like I need to find ways to like flexibly approach working in the studio and having some flexibility over where that studio is. And you know, and not, I didn't plan that, right? I mean, I definitely did not intend that. I never thought I would be making work that, as a mother that has my children in it, I never thought I would do that. I always thought that seemed like a no-no. Rules again. Not like, I mean, look at the history of all these great artists that have done that, but yet, you know, don't plan
You
for
just take it as it fits, and it's just really not only environment, but or situation or place in your life where you at, or what's necessary to actually portray what you're trying to convey through your work. So I hate to cut this off. We can talk forever. I'm really excited that you found the time. It's great to see my friend and mentor again. And I hope everybody else enjoyed. And if you guys have additional questions you would like to ask later on, I'll be happy to communicate it to Althea, and we'll distribute that, especially those readings. And thank you again, everybody, for connecting with us and staying and listening.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you, HASE Inc. Thank you, Nancy, Hartford Art School, everybody for joining us. And a special thanks to you, Althea. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. Really appreciate it. Bye, everybody.